Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of Drunk Agile. We have the star of the show with us, as always, in the background, kind of hiding out. There's Nisha, but she brought a little friend too. Prateek, who's Nisha's friend?
This is Spartacus. I think he's shown up once or twice on the podcast before.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
but that's Spartacus,
Hi,
Nisha's
Spartacus.
little brother. And yeah, he forced his way in here today, so he's here.
Hopefully he won't make too much noise. And then the person that those two people tolerate, of course, is
Prateek Singh.
And my name is Daniel Vacanti. Thank you for joining us. Prateek, what are you drinking tonight?
Tonight is, again, Stag Night.
Yeah, that's a good night. That's always a good night.
Yeah, it's always a good night when it's Stag Night, 65.1%. If you have never seen Stag on this podcast before, then you haven't been watching. So.
And Prateek probably doesn't remember every time he's had Stag on this. That's a good one. I can't top it. But I'm going back to my Blair Athol hand-filled, 55.8%. It is a wine cask. I don't think they ever told me what wine cask it is, but really fan of the Highlands. Really becoming a fan of the Highlands. So cheers, everybody. I'm going to kick us off very quickly, and then I'm going to hand it over to Prateek. There was an interesting conversation that spawned on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. I know I can't believe I said all of those words together in the same sentence, but it's true. There was a kind of interesting question where I forget who it was. Well, I think it was John Miller who kicked off the conversation talking about backlogs and what you should do with backlogs. And he presented a whole bunch of options. And then I throw out the option, well, what if you don't have specifically a product backlog? What if you don't have a product backlog? And that surprised a lot of people. People were kind of shocked to hear that. Prateek, why do you think that was? Can you start us off?
Yeah, it was funny. We were talking just before we got on. Hey, what do we want to talk about? And you said no backlog. Then I was like, yeah, that's it. What's interesting for me is that it surprised people, but then at the same time, I'm not surprised that it surprised people. Yeah.
Think about it.
Think about it.
how meta of you, yeah.
I can see why it surprised people because we're used to having these backlogs, which we groom and which we select things off of. But the reason that it's interesting for me that it surprised people is because most folks who are in the Agile space or familiar with Agile kind of want to do most things just in time. We want to have continuous deployment. We want to have just in time analysis, just in time, pull things just in time. A backlog almost by definition is not just in time. It's a backlog. Something's backing up. It's by definition not just in time. And that's why I find it interesting that an idea of not having a backlog surprises people.
Well, okay, so what would you say to the objection then? But I think before we get into kind of the mechanics of how no backlogs might work, what would you say to the objection of, well, okay, Prateek, but if you don't have a backlog, where do you capture all your ideas? Where, how do you track customer requests? How do you capture any thoughts about new features that we want to add to our product or whatever? Where do those things go? Exactly, that's my answer too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, sure, you want to enter them in your ticketing system, enter them so that someday you might want to search them to find that idea. But if it's important enough, it'll be the next thing you pick up. That's kind of where I am. Yeah,
that's true. There's a difference between a black hole and a backlog, because I think when people hear the word backlog, and the thing is, unfortunately, when it comes to Scrum, and the Scrum Guide kind of reinforces this, for better or for worse, when people hear backlog, they think not only a repository of items, but they think something that is actively managed, right? The items that are in there are ordered, and the items that are in there are refined, and the items that are in there are whatever. And there's work that happens to that backlog. And I think that's probably where we start to get ourselves into trouble, at least from my perspective.
Yep. Yeah, it's and again, both Dan and I come from that Kanban lens of here's where work has started, here's where work has ended, and everything within that is WIP and should be managed. If you're actively sizing, grooming, understanding, analyzing something, it's work in progress. And if it's an ever-growing list of ideas, it's an ever-increasing WIP. So that's kind of why that's kind of the antithesis of everything flow and Kanban that we talk about.
I don't. Just to kind of follow up on that very quickly before we move on to the next topic, I don't know if we've ever said this on this program, but it's one of my favorite things that I learned from Don Reinertsen. I mean, I've learned so many things from Don Reinertsen over the years, but one of the things I love about what he says is he counts work in progress from when the first dollar is spent. That's what he considers work in progress. And I think that's just a brilliant way to think about it. What? Go ahead. What are you going to say?
No, it's just and I haven't heard that, and I haven't heard that quote from Don at all. But for everyone out there, the point at which you start typing that thing in, you're spending dollars on it.
Yeah. And I think we need to think that way more, which is maybe kind of a nice segue, because it's Dan's story time, right? Gather around, children, for another story about how Dan got his ass kicked for being stupid in product development. Right?
By the way, people, this happens every day. Just don't record the podcast every day.
There's no surprise ending here, right? There's no shock reveal, right? This is just Dan being stupid. But when when I first started my product company, and I essentially assumed the role of product owner or product manager. I didn't really necessarily call myself that, but that's what I was doing, essentially. And so as a product manager, I went and I brainstormed all the ideas that I wanted for the product, and I put it in a backlog, and I carefully tracked that backlog, and I carefully ordered it. And I had, probably a good month or two worth of work that I want to track. And then we this is before we kicked off development, right? I was doing all the things I thought I was supposed to as a product manager. And we kicked off development. We kind of set a goal, started working on some things. And, and I kind of had a vision, a thought of, hey, for the next couple of weeks, these are the things we're going to work on. The very first item gets done. We didn't call them PBIs. Right? They were essentially user stories. The very first user story gets done, and my whole idea about what we should be working on changed immediately. Right? And that's okay, right? I was like, this is actually a good thing. We've learned a whole bunch of stuff. So I rolled out a whole bunch of other features, threw them in the backlog, reprioritized it, and we started working on them. The next feature that finished is like, I was wrong again, right? And this is happening every week, and at some point every couple of days. And even when we started getting mature and started pushing code in production, not only was I learning in terms of the features that we were building, but I was learning in terms of getting feedback from customers and what they liked and what they didn't like. And I was constantly wrong every time that I entered something in the backlog and I reordered it, and I thought, hey, this is the priority that we should be working on, or this is the order we should be working on. Every single time, I shouldn't say every single time, but probably 90% of the time I was wrong. And sooner or later, it dawned on me. It's like, this is after maybe a couple of months, it dawned on me, why am I even bothering? It's like, at every time after a feature is delivered, I have a really good idea of what the next thing is that we should be working on, right? I don't need to go searching the backlog to find that thing. I know based on what I learned from the development of that feature, or maybe, like I said, some feedback that came in from the customer, I knew immediately what the next thing is that we should be working on. And we worked on it. That's just kind of how it worked. I don't know, Prateek, I've been talking too much. You jump in.
No, and I don't want people to take this to the extreme of saying that you don't ever have a strategic direction, right? The strategy and backlog are not always aligned, and that's what we're talking about. We're like, you probably have and in your case, and we use this example all the time, your strategic direction was to build this tool that helps teams. Having, and this is the example, we're having a stock picker on that tool for your company stock is not a part of that strategic direction. It isn't. It's just, it's just some random idea. But as you have the strategic direction, as you get feedback on things you deliver, the way you move towards that strategic direction changes.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess I was maybe a little bit different. I mean, I was a little different product owner or product manager. Is that I was literally talking to my development team every day, and I was learning along as they were. If they came to me with technical issues, if they came to me with even logistical issues, whatever, we learned, and it helped me understand what was important and certainly what wasn't important, and more importantly, where we should be investing our money. Maybe that's kind of another thing we should be talking about, because it's not like we were spending somebody else's money. We were literally spending my money, and it helped me really focus where we should be investing, our time and our effort in a just-in-time manner, like you were talking about.
I was thinking, it's like, would anyone ever advise, and maybe someone will, but we would never advise a QA team to have a development backlog? Like to say, these are all the things that developers finish. Just, let there be an unending list of things and we'll pick up from it. If you wouldn't do that for QA from dev, why would you do that for dev from product? Like, if you think about this as the same stream, it's the same idea. As you said before, with Don Reinason's quote of, someone has typed something, so they've started spending dollars on this. Why would we have something that we spend dollars on just sit there?
Yeah. Now, I guess, to kind of throw the other side of it, I am not, I want to be clear. This is kind of think what you were saying before. I am not saying that, every single context can do without backlogs. That's not what I'm saying. I don't think that's what you're saying either, Prateek. But what I am saying is, I would really question any effort that you're putting into managing that backlog or ordering that backlog or refining items in that backlog. I would very, very, very much question those activities, especially as they get further and further away from just in time, like what you're talking about. Because from a lean perspective, sooner or later, I don't know where that boundary is, but sooner or later, those activities become waste, and your time is much better spent elsewhere. Like, I don't know, maybe talking to the development team, or maybe talking to your customers or whatever.
Yeah, it almost forces. What's the I forget the Agile manifesto, but there's something about customer collaboration in there somewhere.
No, there's nothing about collaboration in there. Nothing. No. Nothing.
It almost forces that customer collaboration with the entire team, rather than one person going out talking to a bunch of customers and just saying, here are the 20 things. And when we deliver these 20 things, we'll talk about the next things. Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, I think we've kind of exhausted the subject. What's the final word? How do you bring us home on this, Prateek?
I think I want to repeat what we were talking about earlier, which is, when we say no backlogs, we don't necessarily mean no strategic direction. We're saying you don't really know what's the next most important thing to work on. You know where you're headed, but you do not commit yourself to something way too early. Just wait to find out what's the next most important thing. You still have a strategic direction of where you're headed, but wait to find out what's the next most important thing to do.
I know I said I was going to give you the last word, but I was just reminded of the Annie Duke quote of, the biggest risk is thinking you have a winning strategy when you have a losing one, right?
Actually, that's Annie Duke quoting someone else, and I don't know.
Yeah, it is. It's the guy from SIG. I forget his name. The guy from Susquehanna Investment Group.
It's also the Mark Twain thing of what's most dangerous is not what you don't know, but what you know for sure, but it isn't so.
Or the Donald Rumsfeld, the known.
Okay, we're in the unknown territory now, which usually means either we have dragged this on way too long or we've had too many.
I blame Prateek for going over the 64.9% threshold. We have an unwritten rule.
True.
No, nothing above 64.9. Anyway, if you've listened to this far, thank you very much for sticking with us. We would have bailed on this many minutes ago. So thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for watching this episode. Appreciate you joining us here on Drunk Agile, and we will see you in the next video. Good night, everybody.
Yeah.